And let me start recording. All right. There we go. Okay, so we were talking about the Parthenon, or I was talking about the Parthenon yesterday, and how it was built on top of the Acropolis, which is this hill in Athens that had some other religious structures, but this was the main temple that was on top of that hill. Does anybody know who the Parthenon was dedicated to, what god or goddess was associated with the Parthenon?
I think it was Athena.
It was Athena. So no surprise that Athena is like the patron goddess of Athens. So she was the goddess of wisdom, but also a warrior goddess. And it makes sense that there would be a temple dedicated to her as the main temple on the Acropolis. So this was one of those buildings that was put up in that huge building spree right after the end of the Persian Wars. And unfortunately, the Parthenon was a church at one point in time, and so some of the remaining artwork was either taken down or defaced. And then it was also an armory during World War I. So an armory is where you store like artillery. And it was damaged during World War I as well. So it's been through a lot, and there are some of the metopes, which remember the metopes run along this part here, so along that strip that rests on the columns, which is called the entablature. And we have some of them are fairly well preserved. Most of what was in the triangular pediments is gone, unfortunately. There's artist recreations, so we have some good guesses of what everything looked like. And then at one point in time, there was this giant sculpture of Athena, and that's completely gone. Nobody knows what happened to it, if it was metal and was melted down, or if it was just destroyed or carted off somewhere. So we really don't know what it looked like. They're, again, artist recreations, but they're just guesses based on like written descriptions of what the statue looked like. So this building was designed to house the statue, and it was also not designed to really house people. So if you were going to go worship Athena, you would basically stand outside the temple and listen to the priest or whoever, you know, was officiating that ceremony. So it was really only like the priests of the religion who went inside and saw the statue. And that works for ancient Greece because it's a Mediterranean climate. It's nice. You can go hang out outside and, you know, listen to someone talk about how awesome Athena is. And might not work so well for Virginia in the winter, but it works perfectly well in a Mediterranean climate. So the building wasn't really designed with like large crowds in mind. It was designed so that large crowds could be around it. So there's a lot of space around it, but not inside it. So I want to take a look at some of the artwork that's still on the Parthenon, or that is mostly housed in museums now. So this is one of those metopes. So it's, you know, this square block of, would have been marble that's been carved. And this is carved a lot more deeply than what we were seeing when we looked at Mesopotamia or when we looked at ancient Egypt. So it's still got that flat background. So it's still relief sculpture and not freestanding sculpture. But we've got that great amount of detail, very proportional. So, you know, we can really see that high classical Greek artistic style here. And the metopes around the Parthenon actually tell 4 different stories. So along one wall or one side, we have what's called the Amazonomachy. So this battle between the Amazons, who are these ferocious women warriors, and the Athenians. We have the fall of Troy. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the whole Trojan horse, fall of Troy story. A lot of people are, so I'm gonna assume that you guys are at least vaguely familiar with it. We have what's called the Gigantomachy, so a battle between giants and the Athenians. And then the battle of the centaurs and the Lapiths. So this is that battle here. So we have Greeks who are battling these half human, half horse centaurs. And so each one of these battles takes up a different side of the building. And then the triangular pediments each have a different story as well. So on one pediment, you have kind of the beginning of Athens, the birth of Athens associated with Athena. And then on the other pediment, you have these images of Athenians and Athena and sort of the lifestyle of Athens. And so if you guys want to jump into the chat box and just take a second to say, why do you think there is that particular arrangement of these two pediments with these, you know, references to Athens and the culture of Athens resting on top of these four different major battles? What do you read, like, or get out of that? So to show how their culture was formed during the battles, okay. That could definitely be one take. How they changed throughout the battles. So do you guys think that these battles that they're showing are real? Like they really fought centaurs, or are these battles a metaphor for something else? Right. You know, we know they have to be metaphors because there were no centaurs or giants. Amazon, they could have been real to a certain extent. But yeah, so we're kind of talking about how, you know, there are these mythological legends or tales which are a part of Athenian culture. So we have Athenian culture resting on this history. You know, this history, this legendary history, which the Athenians, it's hard to say whether or not they really believed those things or if they were just stories as metaphors. They were pretty intelligent people, we know. I mean, we have all kinds of mathematics to thank them for. So whenever you guys are in geometry, like you can blame, you know, the Athenians and all the Greeks, and definitely the Islamic Empire, because they were hugely into learning and lots of mathematical advances happened. So we have all those guys to blame for us having to take these wonderful math classes. But they let us launch rockets into space too, so it's a good thing. So we have this idea that Athens is resting on its history. We also have the idea that Athens is rising out and rising above this war that they just came out of. So we're kind of using these battles as a metaphor for the Persian War, as well as metaphors for war in general and for the history of the Athenian people. And so really showing how rooted Athens is in both their past and in how they've kind of overcome, but also gotten better because of this war with the Persians. Maybe not so much for the rest of Greece, since they didn't have all the money to build whatever they wanted. So the last thing we really need to talk about when it comes to the Parthenon is the drapery, which seems weird. Like, why do we need to talk about fabric? But this style of drapery was kind of invented for the Parthenon by the main sculptor who's responsible for kind of designing all the sculptures. So it's called Phidian style drapery, which I am realizing that I did not write down. So let me annotate that. So Phidian style drapery, named after the sculptor Phidias. And so it's this almost wet looking fabric that kind of molds to the body. So you still have the nude and the Greek ideal of the heroic nude. So the nude is like representing, you know, heroes and really important people, because again, they're honest before the gods. But it's kind of clothing them at the same time. So when the Athenians and the Greeks started representing gods and goddesses, they would usually have them clothed. So it was just the people the people need to be naked before God, the gods and goddesses themselves don't need to be. So this style of drapery was invented to kind of like balance those two ideas out that the Greeks had. And we start to see this style of drapery everywhere after the Parthenon goes up and is completed. Let me there we go. Now go back. Sometimes when I annotate, it takes PowerPoint a while to understand that I also want to show you guys other slides. So I just liked this recreation because it's showing kind of going up the Acropolis. There was this entrance right here that you would walk through, and then you would walk up into the area around the Parthenon itself. And there were some other buildings and temples up here. I believe there are some other temples to less important gods, less important to the Athenians. And there might have been some kind of support temples and support buildings as well that went, you know, along with the people who maybe worked for and were part of this temple right here. So I wish I had put this particular piece or just any example in there, and I'm kicking myself that I didn't. But what color were all of these buildings and all of these statues? No, Anastasia, they're not social distancing. They did not have the Rona, so I guess they were able to get nearer to each other than we are. Okay, so a gray-white color. Everybody knows that Greek statues and Greek buildings were like white. Maybe they're gray because they're weathered. We built a giant white house in our capital modeled after these buildings. Turns out that they were not white. The stone is white, but all of these statues and all of these buildings were actually painted. So we have thought for centuries that they were white, and all of the kind of neoclassical architecture and statues that you see are white because of this. And that turned out to be totally wrong. I am going to see if I can pull up a picture. So let me stop sharing my screen and go to this picture online. Colored Greek statues. And let me share my screen again. So all of these statues were painted, and some of them were really unattractively painted, at least in our opinions. There were some real technicolors going on that the Greeks liked, and it is amazing how much it changes how these pieces look when you see them painted. And so art historians kind of discovered this or figured this out because there were traces of that paint that I talked about yesterday, encaustic paint, which is like a wax paint. And so they were able to actually analyze this and find out that these statues were once covered with this colored wax paint that has just worn off, melted off, you know, rubbed off over the years. And so all of these pieces were actually very colorful, including buildings like the Parthenon. So we have been laboring under quite the misconception for many years about what all these pieces look like. This one right here, they think might be what the statue of Athena looked like. So something similar to what we see right here. As I said, it's all guesswork. We don't really know, you know, what that giant statue of Athena looked like, but all of these pieces would have been very brightly colored. So that is all we needed to talk about today. I told you I was going to let you guys out super early today, and I did not lie for once. And so do you guys have any questions before we stop for the day? Awesome. I'll stay on for a minute just in case you think of something you need to ask me. Work on your papers. We're going to start talking about Rome next week, which is going to be, we're going to see some strong similarities between the Romans and the Greeks because the Romans really admired Greek culture. It didn't stop them from taking them over and making them part of the Roman Empire, but they definitely appropriated a lot of the artwork and a lot of the styles of the Greeks. And that's it. I will see you guys on Thursday.